You know, every single day, you're part of one of the most complex, most incredible systems on Earth, the journey of your food. So in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and trace that journey from a field somewhere on the planet all the way to your plate. Okay, let's get into it.
I mean, really think about it for a second. That cup of coffee you might be drinking right now, or the snack you're eating, it didn't just magically appear. It took this incredible journey, often crossing entire continents with countless people and processes involved. We're going to map out that exact journey today.
So what exactly is this industry we're talking about? Well, the easiest way to picture it is to think of one single, massive global kitchen. Seriously, it's a system that's designed to take raw ingredients from literally all over the planet and serve a meal to billions of people every single day. Okay, so a kitchen that big, how on earth does it actually work? It might sound impossibly complicated, but when you break it down, it actually boils down to a few clear, really logical steps. This is basically the blueprint for how the world gets fed.
And the scale is just huge. It's not just the grocery store, it's not just the restaurant, it's everything. Literally every single link in the chain, from the second something is grown or raised to the moment it ends up on your plate.
At its heart, this entire massive process is a four-step journey. That's it. It all starts with the producers. From there, it goes to the processors, then on to the distributors, and it finally ends up with the retailers. That's the fundamental path food takes to get to you, and we're going to walk through each and every step.
So, let's start at the very beginning. Step 1, the producers. This is the absolute foundation of the entire global kitchen. It is the source of everything we eat and drink.
So who are we talking about here? Well, these are the people right at the source. We're talking about farmers in Iowa growing corn that might become tortilla chips or feed for animals. We're talking about ranchers in Texas raising cattle, or fishermen out in the cold waters of Alaska catching salmon that's going to end up in restaurants all over the world. They are the true origin point of it all.
Okay, so once all those raw ingredients are harvested, they move on to step 2, the great food transformation. This is where the processors and manufacturers take over.
And honestly, this is where the magic really happens. This is the stage where a raw product from a farm becomes a familiar item you'd actually recognize on a store shelf. It's kind of like the alchemy of the food world.
And this transformation is just amazing. Simple tomatoes, right? They get processed into Heinz ketchup. Wheat from a farm becomes a box of General Mills Cheerios. Chickens are turned into the Tyson chicken nuggets you see in the freezer aisle. This step literally turns raw nature into the brands we all know.
And this stage isn't just one type of company. You've got massive food processors like Tyson and Nestle. You have the beverage giants like Coca-Cola and PepsiCo. And you even have the companies that help the producers in the first place, like John Deere, who make the equipment that makes modern farming possible.
Okay, so the food has been grown, it's been processed. Now for the final leg of its journey, actually getting it into our hands. And that's where distributors and retailers come into the picture. You can think of distributors as the unsung heroes of the entire food industry. I mean, they are the logistics wizards running this massive, complex network of warehouses and trucks and supply chains, all to make sure that grocery store shelves and restaurant pantries are never, ever empty. So who are these logistics experts? Well, you've got giants like Sysco, whose entire business is just making sure restaurants get their daily deliveries of fresh stuff. And then you have the newer players like Amazon Fresh, who've pretty much perfected the art of bringing those groceries right to your front door.
And that brings us to the final and most familiar stop in the whole chain, retail. After this long, long journey, this is the moment where you, the consumer, finally meet the product.
And you do that in a ton of different places, right? Most of us think of the big supermarkets like Walmart, but it's also fast food chains like McDonald's. It's coffee shops like Starbucks. And it's even the catering companies that supply events. They are all the final link between you and this giant global system.
Now that we've walked through those 4 steps, let's zoom way out. Because this isn't just a local journey. The food on your plate, well, it has a passport. And it's probably stamped from countries all over the world. This is a truly global network. To really see this in action, just think about some of your favorite foods. It might start with a simple ingredient, right? Like cocoa beans, harvested in Ghana,
Which are then shipped clear across the ocean, processed, and turned into those fancy premium chocolate bars made in Germany.
Or how about this one? Coffee beans grown and picked way up high in the mountains of Colombia? And those very same beans end up getting ground and brewed into the latte you're sipping in New York City. That's the global network right there in your cup.
So here's the key takeaway. The industry really does operate like a World Wide Web. It's this beautiful, intricate, interconnected system where pretty much every country plays a part, trading the things they produce best.
And what is the result of this massive global collaboration? This kitchen serves billions. With a B. Every single day, this complex dance of producing, processing, and distributing keeps the entire world fed. The scale is it's almost impossible to wrap your head around.
And that leads us to a final, pretty important thought. We've seen how all these pieces connect, from that farmer in Iowa all the way to the coffee in your cup. But in a system this huge, this interconnected, what happens if just one link in that chain breaks? What happens if one crucial ingredient suddenly just goes missing? It's a question that shows both the incredible strength and maybe the surprising fragility of the global kitchen we all rely on.
Have you ever really, truly thought about the food on your plate? I mean, where it all comes from? Because it's an incredible story, a 200-year saga of wild inventions and big ideas that completely changed how we eat and really how we live. Seriously, think about it. You can get a banana pretty much anywhere, anytime, or fresh strawberries in January. We just expect it. But to our ancestors, that would have been straight up magic. So how did we do it? How did we learn to beat time, distance, and even the seasons? Well, to get the answer, we've got to go back, way back. Okay, first, I want you to picture a world with no supermarkets, no refrigerators, not even a simple can of soup. A world where what you ate was completely locked down by where you lived and what time of year it was. I mean, just look at the difference here. The pre-industrial plate was all about limits. You ate what you grew, when it was in season, and it was a ton of hard work. Now, look at the modern plate. We've got abundance, food from all over the globe, and it's all so convenient. It's a total transformation. Before the 1800s, just staying fed was a full-time job. Most families were what we'd call subsistence farmers. They ate what they could grow, and that was it. Winter meant trying to survive on whatever you could preserve, things like salted meat, dry corn, root vegetables. You want fresh strawberries in December? Forget it, not happening. It was just a constant race against spoilage and the seasons. So, how did we break out of that cycle? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. It all comes down to the Industrial Revolution, where a handful of game-changing inventions kicked off a massive food revolution. And it didn't just change what we ate, it changed everything. And check out how fast this all happened. In just a matter of decades, we came up with the basic technologies to defeat the biggest enemies of food: bacteria, heat, and distance. Each one of these breakthroughs built on the one before it, creating this incredible chain reaction of progress. And it all started, believe it or not, with a military problem. Napoleon needed to figure out how to feed his huge armies while they were on the march. The solution? Canning. A technology that could basically freeze food in time. It completely shattered the tyranny of the seasons. All of a sudden, eating peaches in the middle of a blizzard was actually possible. So if canning conquered time, refrigeration is what conquered distance. I mean, this technology was so much more than just a cold box. It literally created national markets. For the very first time, you could ship fresh meat from the stockyards in Chicago all the way to a restaurant in New York City, and it would be perfectly fine. The grocery store we know today, with all its fresh dairy and meat and produce, is a direct result of this single invention. So, by the time we get to the 20th century, we'd pretty much solved the big problems of making food last and getting it from point A to point B. But now, with more people living in cities and life just getting busier, a whole new challenge popped up: how to save time. Can you even imagine shopping this way today? You'd walk into a store, tell a clerk what you needed, and they would go get every single thing for you from behind a counter. You couldn't really browse or compare things. It was personal, sure, but man, was it slow. And then a store with a great name, Piggly Wiggly, came along with this ridiculously simple but totally revolutionary idea. What if we just let people walk around and grab their own stuff from the shelves? Boom! The supermarket was born. It was a complete game changer that made shopping faster, gave people way more choice, and created the model we still use today. And that need for speed didn't just stay in the grocery aisle. it took over restaurants. See, McDonald's didn't invent the hamburger. Of course not. They invented a system. They called it the Speedy Service System, and it was basically an assembly line for food. It was all about delivering the exact same burger, the exact same way in just minutes. That formula created an entire global industry. You know, sometimes the biggest breakthroughs are just happy accidents. There was this engineer, Percy Spencer, working on radar tech, and he noticed that a chocolate bar in his pocket had melted. From that one little observation, we got the microwave oven, and that led to this explosion of ready-to-eat meals, from TV dinners to microwave popcorn, totally changing our kitchens forever. So, let's fast forward to right now, to the digital age, because the engine of innovation is running faster than ever, and this time it's being powered by data, by software, and by a whole new set of global challenges we've got to face. The quest for convenience has now literally put the entire supermarket in our pockets. We were already heading this way, but the pandemic just hit the fast forward button on online grocery shopping, and it created a new habit that is absolutely here to stay. Think about that. We went from spending all day preparing food to getting groceries delivered in under an hour. And, you know, it's not just about convenience. The tech we have today gives us this incredible level of safety. There are these invisible digital supply chains tracking our food from the second it leaves the farm. So if there's a problem, say with a batch of lettuce, they can pinpoint exactly where it came from in hours instead of weeks. That protects us in a way that was just impossible before. Okay, so we've pretty much figured out preservation, distance, and time. But every solution seems to create a new problem, right? So what are the big food frontiers we're staring down today? The food revolution today is all about new pressures. We're trying to figure out how to grow crops that can survive in a changing climate. We're completely rethinking what sustainability means, from packaging to how we source food. And after decades of convenience foods, we're all demanding healthier, more plant-based options. We're even using tech to create diets personalized right down to our DNA. It's wild. So this incredible 200-year story we've just covered, it's not the end. Not by a long shot. It's really just the setup for the next big chapter. The same human ingenuity that gave us the tin can and the refrigerator is now being aimed at the massive, complex problems of our own time. And that really leaves us with one big, crucial question. The system we built was amazing at solving problems like scarcity and inconvenience. But is that same system capable of evolving to solve the challenges of today, things like climate change, health, and sustainability? That's the real test. The next chapter in our food story is being written as we speak. All right, let's talk about something we all deal with every single day, but probably don't think about nearly enough: the global food industry. We're going to peel back the curtain on this economic powerhouse, a system so enormous it literally shapes our world. So, let's get into it. Okay, to kick things off, let me ask you a question. I want you to picture something massive, economically speaking. How about the entire economy of Japan? And then let's throw in the entire economy of Germany, too. What on earth could possibly be bigger than those two giants put together? Well, the answer is this number right here, $8.7 trillion. That is the insane, staggering value of the global food and beverage industry every single year. And that's not just some random, huge number. To put that into perspective, the machine that feeds all of us is bigger economically than every single country on the planet, except for two, the United States and China. That's it. So you gotta ask, how in the world does an industry get that big? In this first part, we're gonna dig into not just its size, but its incredible momentum. See, this industry isn't just sitting there being huge, it's growing at a blistering pace. We're talking a growth rate of 6.8% a year, which is more than double the average for a national economy. And it's all driven by two really simple, really powerful forces. Our global population just keeps growing, and more people are earning more money to spend on food. To make that growth feel a little more real, think about it like this. The value the food industry adds every single year is around $600 billion. That's like creating the entire economy of the Netherlands from scratch, and then doing it again the next year and the year after that. It's just incredible. But that $8.7 trillion isn't just one big thing. It's actually made up of several core parts. And honestly, each one is a massive industry all on its own. So the industry really has four main players. You've got food processing, that's the biggest piece of the pie by far. Then there's food service, which is all your restaurants, cafes, you name it. After that, you have beverages, and finally, food retail, your classic grocery store. And check out those growth rates for food service and beverages. That tells you a lot about how our lifestyles are changing. And yeah, there is a clear hierarchy here. Food processing is the undisputed king, clocking in at $4.2 trillion. That's almost half of the entire industry. This is basically the engine room, right? It's where all the raw ingredients get turned into the packaged foods that fill up our kitchens. Okay, but the money is only half the story. The impact of this industry isn't just measured in dollars. It's measured in people. So let's pivot and look at the massive human engine that makes this whole thing run. Just look at that number, 1.3 billion. That's how many people work in the global food and beverage industry. Let that sink in for a second. That means 1 out of every 6 working people on this planet gets their paycheck from growing, making, moving, or selling food. No other industry even comes close. Not even a little bit. And here's where all those jobs are. The vast, vast majority, a mind-boggling 1.1 billion, are in agriculture. These are the farmers, the foundation of everything. Now, the other categories, like service, support, and manufacturing, they're still huge, employing hundreds of millions more people. So you can really see the two sides of the workforce here. On one hand, you have the immense scale of farming, the absolute bedrock of the entire supply chain, especially in developing countries. And then on the other hand, you have manufacturing and service jobs. There are fewer of them, sure, but these roles are absolutely vital for local economies everywhere and often pay higher wages in our towns and cities. All right, so we've got the insane numbers. We've got the billions of jobs. Let's pull it all together and ask the big question. Why does all of this matter so much? It matters because of these 4 things that make it totally unique. First, it's universal. Every single person on Earth is a customer. Second, it's incredibly stable. Even in a recession, people have to eat. Third, it's foundational. It makes up a full 10% of the world's entire economic output. And finally, as we just saw, it's essential. It is the planet's single largest employer, period. You know, maybe the simplest way to think about it is this. For every $10 spent on anything in the entire world, one of those dollars goes to food and drinks. It doesn't matter what new technologies pop up or what trends come and go, that fundamental slice of our economy is always there, dedicated to feeding us. So, the big takeaway here is pretty clear. The food and beverage industry isn't just another sector of the economy. It is the most fundamental, the most universal, and, you could argue, the most essential industry in the world. It's the invisible giant that our entire modern civilization is built on. And that leaves us with one last massive question. We've established that this industry is the bedrock of our world today. But as our population keeps climbing, toward 9, maybe 10 billion people, the biggest challenge we're going to face is how this $8.7 trillion giant will change, innovate, and evolve to feed our future.
All right, today we're pulling back the curtain on the massive, almost invisible machine that feeds our entire planet. It's this incredible high-tech global system that gets food from a tiny seed all the way to billions of supermarket shelves. Let's trace that journey.
I mean, seriously, have you ever really stopped to think about it? That cup of coffee you're drinking, that piece of fruit you had this morning, they've likely been on an unbelievable journey, crossing oceans and continents just to get to you.
You know, that journey happens on what I like to call a global food superhighway. It's this super organized system with really clear stages, but it's also just mind-bogglingly complex. It's this delicate dance of technology and logistics that, believe it or not, we all rely on every single day. So, at its heart, this whole global food system can be broken down into these 5 main stages. This is basically the blueprint that gets almost everything we eat from where it started all the way to our dinner plates. So let's start at the very beginning. Now, you might think food starts with a farmer, but these days it really starts with, well, an architect. You've got companies like Bayer designing seeds that can literally survive a drought, while John Deere is building these GPS-guided tractors that plant them with insane precision. This is the high-tech foundation of all of modern farming. Okay, so once you have those high-tech seeds and tools, they're put to work in stage 2, primary production. This is where you find the massive cornfields in Iowa, the sprawling cattle ranches out in Texas, and even these super advanced salmon farms in Norway. They're all creating the raw materials for this global machine.
So you've got the corn, you've got the vegetables. How did they become something you'd actually buy in a store? Well, that's stage 3, processing. Just think about a can of Campbell's soup. The company takes all these raw ingredients from tons of different suppliers and, using a really precise recipe, transforms them into that consistent, shelf-stable product that you know and recognize.
And then you have the final sprint to your plate, which involves a few major players. Wholesalers, like Cisco, they're the middlemen, connecting factories to restaurants. Logistics experts, like Americold, operate this massive cold chain of refrigerated trucks and warehouses to keep everything fresh. And finally, you have retailers, like Walmart, or food service giants like McDonald's, who actually put the finished product in your hands.
So that's the machine. It's a well-oiled system perfected by giants like Coca-Cola. But what happens when a totally new food shows up? How does something as out there as a Cricket protein bar even begin to find its way into this massive system? And that question brings us to our next big idea. It turns out even the most radical, game-changing new foods follow a pretty predictable, though incredibly difficult path to get from just a wild idea to a product you see everywhere. It all starts right here, in what the industry calls the introduction stage. And honestly, you can think of it as the Wild West. The costs are enormous, most consumers are pretty skeptical, and there are hardly any competitors. It is a massive, massive gamble. The journey of plant-based meat is just the perfect example. Beyond Meat spent over $200 million just on R&D before they even had a product people could buy. Then they had to spend millions more just to convince us to try it. It took a solid decade to go from the lab to mainstream success. And today, there's a whole new wave of products facing that exact same uphill battle. We're talking about lab-grown meat from companies like Upside Foods, insect proteins, and all these functional foods designed for specific health benefits. These are the pioneers on today's food frontier. So we've seen how the machine works, and we've seen how innovation breaks in. But where is all this change happening the fastest? Where do these new ideas find their biggest audience? Well, the answer lies in the fastest-growing food markets on the entire planet. Get ready for this number, 22.1%. That is the annual growth rate of the food market in Nigeria. It's just wild. And it's being fueled by the fastest rate of urbanization on the continent, creating this huge, concentrated demand for new food products. But this explosive growth, it's not just happening in Africa. Over in Vietnam, you're seeing incredible 18.7% growth. And it's driven by something totally different. A super young population with rapidly rising incomes that's really eager to try international brands and modern ways of eating. But when it comes to pure, jaw-dropping scale, one market really stands out. And that brings us to the sheer size of India. This one number represents a market worth nearly $400 billion. And while its growth rate is a massive 15.2%, the real story is that millions of people are joining the middle class every single year, and they're demanding convenient, packaged foods for the very first time. But here's what's so fascinating. While all of these markets are growing like crazy, the opportunity in each one is totally unique. In India, it's all about that demand for packaged foods. In Vietnam, it's a hunger for modern stores and imported goods. And in Indonesia, convenience and halal-certified products are the real keys to success.
Okay, so let's bring all this back home. With all this change happening around the globe, what are the big, overarching trends that are going to shape what you and I actually see on our grocery store shelves and on restaurant menus? This quote I came across really just nails a fundamental shift that's happening. For years, being sustainable was a nice bonus, right? A way for brands to stand out. Not anymore. Now, it's becoming the price of entry. Consumers expect it, regulators demand it, and companies have to deliver just to stay in the game. But the single most powerful force reshaping this entire industry is the global consumer's intense new focus on health and wellness. This one shift is influencing everything, from how products get made, how they're marketed, and it's being driven by this perfect storm of social and technological changes. Yeah, it's really being pushed by 4 major forces all at once. You have aging populations in developed countries looking to food to live longer. You have rising healthcare costs pushing people toward preventing illness with nutrition. The pandemic, of course, made everyone way more aware of their health. And finally, tech is now allowing for personalized nutrition based on our own DNA.
So when you combine the raw power of this global machine, the crazy pace of innovation, the explosive growth in new markets, and these massive consumer trends, it really leads to one final big question. What do you think the dinner plate of the future is actually going to look like? You know,
Every single day, we're all part of this incredible, almost invisible journey, a journey that brings food to our tables. And it's not simple. We're talking about a system that literally spans continents and involves millions of people. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that secret journey. We're diving deep into the farm-to-fork value chain.
I mean, seriously, just think about your last meal for a second. That piece of chicken, those veggies, the bread, none of it just poof appeared on your plate, right? It had to travel through this massive, interconnected network just to get to you. So the real question is, how did it actually get here? Well, let's find out.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to follow the food's entire journey. We'll start where it all begins, then see how it gets transformed from farm to factory. After that, we'll track it on the long road to retail, get a handle on just how massive this trillion-dollar system is, and finally, we'll look at how big global choices end up on our local plates.
Okay, let's kick things off. Our journey begins by really trying to understand the massive system that feeds the world. And believe me, this thing is a beast. It's a network so vast and complex, it's running 24/7 on a global scale, all just to feed billions of people. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
So the key concept we're talking about here is the farm-to-fork value chain. And you gotta focus on that keyword, value. This is not just a supply chain. It's not just about moving boxes from point A to point B. No, at every single step, something is done to the food to make it better, safer, more convenient, longer lasting. That's where the value gets added.
In this whole journey, it basically breaks down into 4 key stages. First, you've got primary production. Then comes processing and manufacturing. After that, it's all about distribution and logistics. And finally, it lands in retail and food service. And that last part, well, that's where we, the consumers, come into the picture.
Okay, so let's zoom in on those first 2 steps, from the farm to the factory. This is, you could say, the magical transformation stage. It's where raw materials, stuff grown in the ground or raised on a farm, become the familiar products we actually recognize on a store shelf. So, stage 1, primary production. It all starts at the source, right? On the farm. Think about a McDonald's chicken nugget. That chicken doesn't just magically appear in the box. Way before that, it starts with a contract grower for a huge company like Tyson Foods who's actually raising the chicken. This is the absolute first step, the foundation for everything we eat.
But here's something that might actually surprise you when you look at where your money goes. The farm itself, that primary production stage, it's only about 15 to 20% of the final price you pay. That's it? The vast majority of the cost? Well, that gets tacked on way later in the chain.
So that begs the question, right? If the farmer's getting such a small slice of the pie, where is all that value and all that cost being added? Well, this next stage, it's a huge piece of the puzzle.
This is where the big processors come into play. Think Nestle, General Mills. These guys are basically value-adding machines. They do a few key things. First, they add convenience. Think meal kits. They also extend shelf life through things like canning or freezing, which lets food travel all over the world. And maybe most importantly, they build massive brands, turning simple corn, for example, into a product you know and trust.
And check this out. This is a perfect example of that convenience value. On one side, you've got your raw ingredients. You got to plan, shop, prep, the whole deal. On the other side, a HelloFresh meal kit. It's basically the same food, but because they've pre-portioned everything and thrown in a recipe, they've created a service that people will pay 3, even 4 times more for. Now that is value addition in action.
All right, so the food's been processed, it's been packaged, but it still has to get to us, right? This brings us to the next leg of the journey, the long road to retail. And honestly, this is where things get really, really complex. We're talking about the world of logistics.
Stage 3 is distribution, and it is a game of absolutely massive scale. Take a company like Cisco. They supply thousands upon thousands of restaurants, and they're not just running a few trucks around. We're talking about a network of over 330 distribution facilities, all working together like a giant orchestra to make sure every restaurant kitchen has exactly what it needs every single day. The coordination is insane.
And getting all this food from point A to point B, it's a constant balancing act between cost and speed. Shipping something on a boat across the ocean is super cheap, which is perfect for something sturdy like bananas. But if you want fresh berries from Chile to show up in New York overnight, well, you're going to have to pay a serious premium for air freight. Every single food product has its own ideal ride, depending on what it is and where it's going.
And for a huge amount of our food, none of this would even be possible without one absolutely critical piece of the puzzle, the cold chain. Think of it as an unbroken, temperature-controlled supply line that runs from the very beginning to the very end. If there's a single break in that chain, just one little temperature fluctuation, an entire shipment can be ruined. It's this high-stakes, totally invisible lifeline for our food supply.
Okay, so we've followed the physical journey. Now, let's follow the money. Because when you start to add all of this up, the farming, the processing, the shipping, you quickly realize you're looking at one of the largest, most powerful economic systems on the entire planet. This is a trillion-dollar system.
And the scale here, it is just staggering. I mean, look at this. Food retail alone is a $5.7 trillion market. To give you some perspective, that's more than the entire GDP of Japan. We're not talking about millions or even billions here. This is a true global economic engine.
And this really drives home a point we touched on earlier. Look at the comparison. The end of the chain, the retail part, is actually a bigger market, financially speaking, than the beginning, the agricultural production. So the most money changes hands at the point that's closest to us, the consumers.
But the impact here, it's not just about the money. It's also measured in people. Get this number, 200 million. That's how many people are employed across the globe in this farm-to-fork value chain. That's nearly 6% of the entire world's workforce, all dedicated to one thing, getting food onto our plates. It's huge.
All right, for our last section, let's zoom way out and look at the big picture. Because behind every single product on the shelf, there's a high-level strategy. The choices that these huge companies make about where and how they get their ingredients, well, those choices have a massive impact on everything, right down to what actually ends up on your plate.
And you can really see this in two totally different strategies. On one hand, you have a global giant like Nestle. They'll source their cocoa from 3 or more continents. Why? It's all about supply security and keeping costs as low as possible. It's like a global chess game. But then, on the other hand, you have a company like Chipotle. They've built their entire brand on sourcing locally and regionally, making freshness their #1 priority, above pretty much everything else.
And for a company like Chipotle, their famous tagline, "Food with Integrity," that's not just some clever marketing slogan. It's their core business strategy. It dictates their entire supply chain, it drives their marketing, and it's the reason they can charge a premium price. It's a promise they're making to the consumer, and it's baked into their entire value chain.
And really, this is what it all boils down to. Those huge, high-level strategic choices, going global versus staying local, or prioritizing cost versus freshness, they end up shaping everything for us as consumers. They determine the price we pay at the checkout, the quality and freshness of our food, and even which farming communities on the other side of the world get to thrive.
So here's a little food for thought. The next time you sit down to eat, just take a look at your plate and ask yourself, what part of this incredible hidden journey are you thinking about? Is it the farm where it all began? The factory that turned it into something new? The refrigerated truck that carried it 1,000 miles? Or the massive global strategy that put it there in the first place? The whole story, it's right there on your fork.
Hey, welcome. It's kind of funny. We spend so much time thinking about what food to buy, but have you ever really stopped to think about how it gets to us in the first place? Behind every single item in your kitchen, there's this incredible, almost totally invisible journey. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that hidden world. I mean, really think about it. How is it possible that a carton of milk can sit in your fridge for weeks, or that can of soup in your pantry can be perfectly good for years? It seems kind of like magic, right? Well, it's not magic, it's some seriously cool science. And that's exactly the journey we're going on together. We're going to follow our food through this massive high-tech system of processing, packaging, and shipping that is working 24/7, all day, every day, just to feed us. So, our first stop has to be the processing plant. This is where raw ingredients, things like wheat from the field or milk from a cow, are completely transformed from something that would spoil really quickly into the stable foods that we recognize on the shelves. And maybe the single most powerful tool they have in this transformation is heat. It's called thermal processing, and the whole idea is to use carefully controlled heat to kill off all the nasty bacteria and enzymes that make food go bad. And the result? Well, it can stretch the shelf life of food from just a few days to literally years. But here's where it gets interesting. How much heat you use creates totally different products. Let's take milk. The milk you buy in the refrigerated section, like Lactaid, is pasteurized. That's enough heat to kill the dangerous stuff, and it'll last you a few weeks in the fridge. But then you have shelf-stable milk like Parmalat. That stuff is sterilized with ultra-high heat, which kills everything. And that's why you can keep it in your pantry for months without it ever going bad. Okay, so what if you want a food to last even longer? We're talking years, not months. Well, for that, you need to bring out the big guns, something called retort processing. This is the secret weapon behind pretty much every single canned good you own. And the scale here is just mind-boggling. Campbell's, just by themselves, uses this method, blasting sealed cans with steam and pressure to make 2.5 billion cans of soup every year. It means that can of chicken noodle soup in your cabinet could be a couple of years old, and it's still perfectly safe and delicious, all thanks to this tech. But processing isn't all about heat. A lot of it is purely mechanical. Take a look at how a company like Cargill squeezes every bit of value out of a single soybean. First, they come in and use these massive presses to separate the oil. Then, they use a solvent to get every last remaining drop out. In the end, you have two totally different products, soybean oil and protein meal, that go into everything from your salad dressing to the feed for livestock. Nothing is wasted. And the speed of this mechanical processing is just insane. To make something like chicken nuggets, where every single one needs to have the exact same texture, companies like Tyson use these enormous grinders. They can process 6,000 pounds of chicken an hour. That's what size reduction is all about. It's the key to making sure everything is perfectly consistent. Okay, so the food is processed, it's ready, but now it needs to be protected for its long journey to the store. And that brings us to our next stop, packaging. And I want you to stop thinking of this as just a box or a bag. Modern food packaging is really an active piece of technology. It's like a high-tech shield for our food. See, food has two main enemies out there in the world, oxygen and moisture. Oxygen is what makes chips go stale and fats go rancid. And moisture? Well, that can lead to mold or just make things soggy and gross. So modern packaging is engineered to fight a constant war against these two things. And this is why we call it active packaging. It's actually doing something. You know that little white packet you always find in a bag of beef jerky? That's an oxygen scavenger. It's literally sucking up all the oxygen in the bag, which can take the shelf life from just a few months to over 2 years. Other packages have systems to control humidity, keeping your salad greens crisp, or even smart indicators that change color to warn you if your food has gotten too warm and might not be safe anymore. It's brilliant. Okay, but let's be real. All of this high-tech packaging creates a huge environmental question, right? So what is the industry doing about it? Well, the main response really boils down to innovation. And one of the simplest but most effective strategies is just using less material. Through some really clever engineering, Coca-Cola has figured out how to make its plastic bottles lighter and lighter over the years. That alone saves over 200 million pounds of plastic every single year. It's a massive win for sustainability. And hey, it also lowers their shipping costs. All right, our food has been processed and it's safely packaged. Now comes the next great challenge, getting it to the store. This is what I like to call the Great Food Migration, and it is a logistical ballet of incredible scale and, you guessed it, precision. Now, this migration generally happens in one of two ways. You have giant retailers like Walmart, who use what's called a hub-and-spoke model. Basically, everything from all their suppliers gets sent to a few massive distribution centers, the hubs, and then sent out to the individual stores. This is perfect for non-perishables. On the flip side, for things that need to be super fresh, like a bottle of Coke, companies use direct store delivery. That's exactly what it sounds like, straight from the factory right to the store shelf, to get it there as fast as possible. And the difference in efficiency is huge. You can really see it here. By consolidating everything into those giant hubs, Walmart's model can slash its transportation costs by 20 to 30%. It's a game of massive, massive efficiency. And that brings us to the final leg of the journey. This is where it gets the most complex, the most delicate, and the most critical. The specialized logistics that get that food the last few miles and into our hands. For a huge portion of the food we eat, we're talking meat, dairy, frozen pizza, you name it, everything depends on one single concept, the cold chain. Think of it as an unbroken, temperature-controlled bubble that follows the food from the factory all the way to the grocery store. If that chain breaks, even for just a little while, the food is ruined. Or even worse, it could become unsafe to eat. But here's the thing. Maintaining that cold chain isn't as simple as just keeping stuff cold. Oh no. The level of precision required for each specific type of food is just, well, it's incredible. Just take a look at this. It's wild. Frozen foods have to stay way below zero. Fresh meat needs to be held just at the edge of freezing, but then fresh produce needs a much warmer temperature and really high humidity. And fine wine, it needs a cellar temperature, controlled humidity, and you can't even let it vibrate too much. Each one of these categories has its own non-negotiable set of rules. It means a single truck might actually have 3 or 4 different temperature zones inside just to carry everything at once. It's a staggering feat of engineering. So I guess the crucial point is this. The next time you're at the store and you grab a carton of milk or a can of soup, just take a second to think about the incredible journey it took to get there. There's this vast, complicated, and almost totally invisible system working around the clock every single day to make sure our food is safe, it's affordable, and it's there when we want it. It's a system that has, against all odds, figured out how to feed billions of people. But the question we have to ask ourselves now is, what's next? As the world keeps changing, the pressure is on to make this incredible system even smarter, even faster, and most importantly, a lot more sustainable for the future. Thanks so much for joining me.
Have you ever really thought about the food you eat? Not just what it is, but the incredible invisible journey it took to get to you. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that journey. A hidden world of unbelievable speed, massive scale, and some seriously mind-boggling complexity.
So, let's start with something super simple, your morning coffee. We grab it, we drink it, we move on with our day. But have you ever stopped, even for a second, to wonder what it actually took to get that cup into your hands?
Because the truth is, that $5 coffee you just bought is the absolute final step in a massive global relay race. It's this incredible network of farmers, shippers, roasters, and baristas, all working in perfect sync across oceans and continents, just for you.
So let's really dive into that hidden world. We're going to see that behind even the simplest food item, there's a story. And that story is often a high-stakes race against the clock. See, here's the thing. Moving food isn't like shipping iPhones or sneakers. The entire food supply chain is a completely different beast, and it's built around a few unique challenges that make it a constant, nail-biting race against time.
It really all boils down to 3 huge challenges. First, there's perishability, which is just a fancy way of saying food has a ticking clock on it before it goes bad. Second, safety. This is non-negotiable. It's about protecting all of us. And third, seasonality. You know, the constant fight against Mother Nature and her unpredictable whims.
To really get what perishability means, think about this. A brand new car. It can sit on a dealer's lot for weeks, maybe even months, no problem. But fresh strawberries? Nope. They are playing a whole different game.
From the second those strawberries are picked in a field to the moment you see them in the grocery store, the entire system has a window of maybe 5 to 7 days. That's it. Hitting that deadline requires this amazing, lightning-fast, and perfectly chilled logistics network. It's incredible.
And then there's safety. It's all about being able to trace our food. Back in 2018, a bad batch of romaine lettuce cost the industry hundreds of millions of dollars because they just couldn't find the source fast enough. But today, the technology is just wow. Using blockchain, Walmart can take a random bag of spinach and trace it back to the exact field it came from in just 2.2 seconds. Insane, right?
Okay, so we've seen how complex and urgent this all is, but now let's zoom out. Let's really zoom out and look at the absolutely staggering, almost unbelievable scale of this global food system.
Every single year, the entire global food supply chain is valued at $8.7 trillion. Let that sink in for a second. That's a number so huge, it's honestly hard to even picture.
And it's not just about the money. It's about the people. Over 1 billion people work in this system. 1 billion. That makes the food industry the single largest employer on planet Earth. Nothing else even comes close.
And if we narrow in on just the food that crosses international borders, we're talking about a global trade market worth over $1.8 trillion a year. You can see right here how that stacks up against other massive industries. It's an absolute economic powerhouse.
So who exactly are these billion-plus people in this $8 trillion system? Well, let's meet the key players. Think of it as a chain of hands, each one responsible for getting that food from the farm all the way to your fork.
From a bird's eye view, the journey looks pretty simple, right? It starts with production, then it moves to processing, then on to distribution, and finally it lands with, well, with you. But let's break down what's really happening at each of those steps. So step 1, production. And this is way more than just the farmers, even though, of course, it starts with them. It also includes the companies that make modern farming possible, like John Deere building the tractors or Bayer engineering the seeds. And it includes groups like Ocean Spray, which is actually a co-op that lets hundreds of small cranberry farmers band together to compete on the world stage.
Next up is processing and manufacturing. This is the stage where raw stuff gets transformed into the packaged food we actually recognize. You've got the giants like Nestle or General Mills turning wheat into cereal, but you also have huge companies that you've never heard of, making the store brands for your supermarket, or even highly specialized suppliers that create the exact flavor of, say, nacho cheese that makes a product taste the same every time.
Okay, the food is made, it's packaged, but now it has to get everywhere. That's step 3, distribution. This is a massive hidden world of logistics companies like Cisco that supply over 500,000 restaurants. It's fleets of specialized refrigerated trucks crisscrossing the country, and these enormous temperature-controlled warehouses that act as the hubs for this whole network.
And this table really shows you the economic engine at work here in the US alone. Look at this. The farmers and producers, they generate over $170 billion. But then watch how the value gets added down the line. The processors add another $465 billion, and by the time it gets to the grocery store, we're talking $678 billion. Each link in this chain adds massive economic value and employs millions of people.
So, we've talked about this colossal, complicated system, trillions of dollars, billions of people. But now we've got to ask the big question. What does any of this mean for you? How does all this complexity connect back to the price you pay at the checkout?
Well, think about this. The average American family spends about $7,700 a year on food. That's nearly 13% of their entire household income. That's a pretty big slice of the pie for most of us. So, where is all that money actually going?
Okay, this is the perfect aha moment. Let's take something super simple, like this bag of potato chips that costs about $3. Out of that $3, how much do you think goes back to the farmer for the actual potatoes? Take a guess. Just 15 cents, that's it. The rest, it pays for literally everything else we just talked about. 45 cents for processing, 85 cents for the shiny bag and all the shipping, and $1.54 for the grocery store's costs and the profit for every single company along that entire chain.
So, when you get right down to it, the price you pay for food isn't just for the ingredients inside the package. It's your ticket into this whole global ecosystem. It pays for the wages, the technology, the fuel, and the expertise it takes to get that one single product from a field somewhere in the world onto your local shelf, right when you want it.
So I want to leave you with one final thought. The next time you sit down to eat, whether it's an apple or a full meal, just pause for a second. Knowing everything that went into it, all the hands that touched it, all the miles it traveled, what story is your next meal trying to tell you?
We've all been there, right? You're just wandering the aisles of a supermarket trying to get your shopping done. But what if I told you that every single item on those shelves, from the avocados to the Pop-Tarts, is placed with incredible precision? It's all part of a massive hidden system. And in this explainer, we're going to crack that code. It's probably the most classic grocery store mystery. Why on earth do you have to walk past everything else all the way to the back wall just to grab a gallon of milk? Well, I can tell you it is definitely not an accident. It's a very deliberate strategy, and honestly, it's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding how our food really gets to us. You see, the entire food industry, and I mean everything from the farm to the shelf, is organized into these really distinct categories. And if you understand them, it doesn't just explain the store layout. It pulls back the curtain on these huge logistical battles and consumer trends that shape literally everything we eat. Okay, so first up, we have the most high-stakes category of them all. This is where food is in a constant, desperate battle against the clock. Just think about it. Fresh produce, dairy, meat. These things don't have the luxury of sitting in a warehouse for months. Their journey is this frantic sprint, a kind of logistical ballet designed to get them from the source to your kitchen before they spoil. And if you get it wrong, the costs are absolutely enormous. And if you want to get a sense of just how big this problem is, get this. In the US alone, over $15 billion worth of fresh produce is just thrown away every single year because it spoils. That is the insane cost of losing this race against time, and it's exactly why these companies are so obsessed with efficiency. And, you know, the challenge is different for every product. For fresh produce, the name of the game is speed and regional distribution. Get it there fast. But for protein, it gets way more complex. We're talking global supply chains, strict government inspections, and even more rigorous temperature controls. This unbroken cold chain is the absolute lifeline for these products. So who are the companies that have mastered this race? They're the titans of the industry. You've got Walmart, which uses a network of regional farms to get produce to stores quickly. Kroger is using AI to predict exactly how many berries they'll need. And Nestlé, they're using IoT sensors to monitor the temperature of their dairy products in real time. It's basically a high-tech war against waste. But then you walk to the other side of the store, and the rules of the game are completely different. We are leaving the high-speed world of perishables and entering what I like to call the global pantry. In this world, time is actually on your side. We're talking about your canned soups, your pasta, frozen pizzas, all the foods that are designed to last. The goal here isn't just surviving a few days. It's about being produced on a massive global scale and shipped all over the world, just waiting on a shelf for you. Yeah, the journey for these foods isn't a sprint. It's more of a highly engineered manufacturing process. You start with raw ingredients, they move through processing, like canning or freezing, that locks in that long shelf life. And then they're sent out through this massive global distribution network. It's how a can of Campbell's soup in Tokyo can taste exactly the same as one in Toronto. Pretty amazing. And you should not underestimate the power of this category. Let's just take frozen foods. After that huge surge during the pandemic, the US market is now worth an incredible $72 billion. Why? Well, because we all stocked our pantries, and that convenience and reduced waste just became a habit that stuck. But there's a really fascinating counter-trend happening here. As much as we all love convenience, there's a growing pushback against all those complex artificial ingredients. It's called the clean label movement, and it is forcing giants like Kraft Heinz and General Mills to completely rethink some of their most classic, iconic formulas. And that brings us right to our final section, the categories that aren't just about preservation or convenience, but are all about innovation and identity. This is really where food is evolving right before our eyes. So what are functional foods? It's a simple idea, really. They're foods designed to give you health benefits that go way beyond just basic nutrition. It's this concept of food as medicine, and it's a market that has just exploded to over $300 billion. Think about your own shopping. You're not just eating yogurt anymore. You're buying Activia for the probiotics to help your gut health. You're not just having breakfast. You're eating fortified cereals to get essential vitamins. From energy drinks to omega-3 eggs, we are all starting to use food as a tool to actively manage our health. And this disruption is happening on a massive scale, especially with protein. I mean, the alternative protein market, led by brands like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, is projected to hit nearly $40 billion by 2030. This isn't just a niche little trend, it's a fundamental shift, and it's driven by our concerns about health and sustainability. The forces behind this new frontier are pretty clear. It's this powerful mix of wanting better health and wellness, having a growing appetite for global cuisines, a real focus on sustainability, and, of course, that ever-present need for convenience. These are the big trends shaping the future of what we eat. Ultimately, this whole category is like a mirror. The rising popularity of authentic global ingredients like gochujang and the fact that plant-based burgers are now totally mainstream, it all shows how our values around health, culture, and the environment are showing up directly on our dinner plates. So how do all of these massive, often competing forces actually come together? Well, the answer is right there in your shopping cart. Seriously, next time you're at the checkout, just look down at your cart. You will see it right there. The fresh, perishable produce from that race against spoilage sitting right next to the shelf-stable pasta from the global pantry. You'll see a traditional block of cheese next to an innovative, functional kombucha. Your cart? It's the battlefield where all these different trends collide. And here it is. This is your final cheat sheet to decode it all. You can see the key differences right at a glance. The shelf life, the logistics, the major players, and the consumer trend that's driving each and every category. This is the hidden logic of the supermarket totally laid bare. And that really brings us to the final question. These categories, they're not set in stone. They're constantly changing based on new technology, on culture, and on our own priorities. So as we look to the future, the real question isn't just what the supermarket will look like, but what choices we'll all be making for ourselves. what's your plate going to look like?